can also help to provide better direction for our drivers as they come through our community. We can help drivers to see pedestrians better. From a pedestrian standpoint, we can improve our crosswalks, we can support sidewalks, and we can do a marketing campaign to help encourage pedestrians to do their best to be more visible. So we're going to talk a little bit about each of these areas. Some traffic calming devices are things like narrow driving lanes or adding bike lanes. So you can see in that picture on the left there, obviously the pavement is wide, but they've had narrower driving lanes just by putting the lines in. I'm sorry, Bob, I'm standing in your way. I apologize. But that's a traffic calming device. By making your roadways narrower, even though you haven't actually changed the footprint, drivers tend to feel more confined and they want to stay within those lanes, and so they drive a little slower, they're more cautious, they're more careful. The same thing happens with bike lanes. As we add bike lanes, just by painting them on the streets that already have the width available, it helps to slow traffic and create a space where bikers can safely ride their bikes. There's some really great benefits that go along with on-street bike lanes as well. Painted bike lanes allow for both users to safely navigate a roadway. Safety vehicles like fire trucks and ambulances are particularly fond of these bike lanes, as it allows a place for cars to pull off to so that there's more space for those vehicles to navigate around. We're going to talk a little bit about some other traffic calming devices, curb extensions or bump outs. We really feel like a problem area for us in this community includes a few intersections that were very wide, and it creates a problem for pedestrians to get across safely while walking with the green light. Some of these intersections are compounded by having dedicated turning signals that make those intersections even more complex for a pedestrian to get across. So as you can see, the diagram on the right corner there shows how the curb or there's a bump out where the sidewalk and the curb actually come out into the street, and it shortens. And what it does is it effectively shortens the distance that a pedestrian has to navigate in order to get across the street. The picture on the left is a temporary bump out, or temporary is the best way to describe it. Those dividers, those barriers, those obstacles can be moved. And that allows us to find out, well, does it work? Is this a good place to have a bump out? Can we move it for snow removal? Is it going to be a problem for people? Does it really help? Is it what we need to do? So if you look at how that's designed, it would fit pretty well within an area that we're going to talk about more specific here in just a minute. But that gives you an idea of what a curb extension or a bump out is. You've seen these maybe in downtown Waterloo, downtown Cedar Falls. Oline, I believe, has some. When we talk about some driver issues, we need to maybe provide some better driver direction. We can provide more and better signs to indicate what will happen. Perhaps the lane will be narrowing, and you can see the sign there. It's pretty easy to do that. You can also remind drivers where the pedestrians are or where they're likely to be. Also, reminders of what drivers are expected to do can help with compliance. So if you look at the one, state law really does say that pedestrian gets right of way, and you need to stop. But we don't always remind our drivers of that. So it's just a simple way to help drivers know what's expected and what they should do. So these next few slides then are going to talk about what we maybe can do for pedestrians. Identifying crosswalks and making crosswalks much more visible are some simple things to help those pedestrians know where they should cross and to alert drivers that, again, this is a place where we've got people who are trying to get across the street. Many of our crosswalks here in town right now are pretty small, narrow, they're faded, they're difficult to see. We've got some folks out there who are experts. There's a gentleman named Dan Burden who is with the Walkable and Livable Communities Initiative, and I was with him this December, and what he suggested was the bigger the better these crosswalks can be. 12 or 16 feet where you have a lot of people. So he's saying, you know, a 3-foot long crosswalk isn't very big. The bigger the better, the more bold those stripes, the better it is for both pedestrians and drivers to see. I do want to point out down at on the right hand there, as was noted in the introduction and when Mr. Wilson was here with the Board of Trustees from the library, a concern in front of the library is that there's no real good place for folks to cross. So we have crosswalks there, but it's not And this is one option that we found for that area. It's designed very much like what our first street is out in front of the library. There's a turning center lane and a lane on the right and a lane on the left for east and west traffic. This is completely legal. You can put a sign that warns of pedestrians right in the street. And you can see how it's designed, again, like what ours is. And we're maybe suggesting that that's something we want to look at, as opposed to moving a stoplight or doing some other more expensive alternatives. This is something that we believe would be very, very helpful, and it's been shown to be quite useful to alert drivers that there's likely to be pedestrians there. A couple of other areas we talked about is sidewalk support, and we know that this community has an ordinance, and I went through the code, and by golly, if there's a sidewalk there, pedestrians are supposed to use it. Guilty of not. And that's partly because sometimes the sidewalks have barriers or obstacles, and I also, can become a little frustrated when you're in and out and weaving back and forth, so sometimes it seems to be easier if I'm jogging to just stay on the street, and I know that's not right. So if we can encourage our homeowners and our business owners and our residential areas to kind of support those sidewalks, to clear them off, to replace areas that have been dug up, that can be a really important piece for pedestrian compliance, to get us on the sidewalks where we're supposed to be. So we're talking about educating, encouraging, and then enforcing those sidewalks, helping folks to really use them where we know they are. The ones that we have, let's keep them, maintained and available for use. And then the other one, again, we talked a little bit about marketing. Visibility is very important, and we have the ability to help promote pedestrian safety by using a variety of sources. And one of the things that we thought was we could encourage our pedestrians to be more proactive, to be visible wearing light clothing and reflective clothes, and to carry a light when they're out. And these are some of the ways that we thought that we could do that. Get that information out there about the awareness of what we're talking about. I mean, if we decided to put a bike lane in, we need to tell people what that's for. It's important that we share how to use those bike lanes, and there's some access that we can do that through the city resources, which would include, the website. We've got access to newspapers, wonderful newspaper resources. We can use our television channel 9, as well as some pamphlets and brochures and radio spots as well. So this leads us to why we're really here. And again, we've gotten together, we did a lot of work over the last 6 to 8 weeks. This pedestrian group has met weekly. We've done a lot of studying. We've gotten information. We haven't taken field trips, but maybe that's something ahead for us. But we've done some work, and we then met with the Sidewalks, Alleys, and Streets, Alleys, and Sidewalks Committee and made a recommendation to them. And we would hope tonight then that you would consider the recommendation that they make to you. So now I have just a little more on-point information about the packet that you have in front of you, about what we're specifically requesting. Did anybody have any questions about the PowerPoint right now? Yes.
I was reading this afternoon, and I'll probably ask an embarrassingly simple question. I'm good at that. And that is, the bike lanes, where are they located? Are they in the middle of the street? Are they on you said you had 2 5-foot spaces?
Right.
Are they're against the sides of the street?
Well,
does that affect parking? That's my question.
Well, this is where we're headed right now. It's very specifics. So what we were thinking is that if we started, incredible.
Yeah.
If we started.
I'm gonna like your answer, whatever
Absolutely.
it is now.
Our recommendation is actually to start where parking stops, if you're headed west.
Start again. I was talking to myself.
Where the parking stops downtown, if you're headed west on First Street, that would be where the bike lanes would begin. So, like at the First Street Bridge, and then on west. We haven't exactly figured out quite how far it should go. We'd love it to go all the way to 20th Avenue. I don't know if it will get that far, if we have the ability to do that, but I believe the measurements are that we could have 2 5-foot wide bike lanes on either side of the street, all the way out there. And then, now again, not quite sure where we would
there's
start.
No parking now.
There's no parking now. Not quite sure where it would start, if it would be, say, right here in front of City Hall, where again, there's no parking to the east, or if we would have to go up to maybe the Quick Start corner, and that's partly because this is still 150. So we do have some concerns with the DOT and making sure that it's allowed, but that's kind of what we're thinking, is bike lanes on both east and west on First Street,
you canvass the downtown merchants about this? Your
Well, we have one
projects,
gentleman
plans?
right here who is a downtown merchant, and he's all in favor of what we've suggested so far.
The guy with the nice goatee?
Yeah, I like yours too.
What do you think as a merchant? Would this be a hindrance?
I think it would be a big plus. I really do. We're talking about the traffic calming, with the bump outs. I think that would be a very, very good thing. It'd slow the traffic down, plus it would add safety to our pedestrians. And if we have a bike lane, you know, you're gonna have safer travel for the bikers.
Yeah, I don't personally have an objection to anything you've got here, but I just wonder because sometimes merchants have a different view of this. You've got 60% increase in retail business. I question that, you know, but if this improves it to that level, that's amazing. But and I accept your research that that's what it does, but I was just curious how the Main Street had reacted, you know.
One of the things that we believe is, you know, first of all, let's briefly touch on a couple of the other real specific recommendations. And we talked about narrowing the road and